Billy, thanks for joining me for this special, I guess I would call this a 2-year anniversary conversation. We're talking about some of the themes related to the Faith of Elvis, which was so much fun to work with you on. So, congrats and thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for writing it. So,
Well, I couldn't have written it without all your amazing stories. I was just the scribe. I kind of put the pieces together, but you brought all the gold to the party. So, thank you for that.
thank you. Yeah,
So, I've got
so
a
it's been an interesting
yeah,
two
go
years
ahead.
since it's come out. So, I love all the feedback that we got on it. People, really seem to love the book, and I mean,
Yeah.
our main. Well, there were several goals for this book when I first started. It was the first one was for the fans to give them a better perspective of what Elvis was really like instead of they've only seen just one side of Elvis, the entertainer side. They never got to see the man that was off the stage, and that's what I wanted to show was that guy, and also do something positive about him because there's been a lot said and done about him since he's passed away, and then sadly, I was really hoping. I mean, we even discussed this before it even came out. I wanted to do this for Lisa. I wanted
Mhm.
her to give her. You know, I'm not sure what she heard when Elvis passed away. I'm sure it wasn't good, but I wanted her to see her dad in a different light, to where she would go, my dad really was a good person, and he was. And
Mhm.
I really that part when I heard she passed away, it was just maybe what a month or so after the book come out, and that just devastated me. I mean, I still have a hard time when I think about her passing. I just it's just too surreal for me.
Mm.
So,
It's
but
interesting to me that even just in the last couple of years, there have been a lot of major things come out about Elvis in terms of, a couple of movies. Of course, one of those was the massive Elvis movie that came out with Austin Butler starring as Elvis. And, of course, there are always Elvis books coming out. There have been a
yeah,
couple, there's was a really great documentary that came out about the 68 comeback special. I noticed there's another one coming out, I think, on Netflix pretty soon. Lisa Marie's book just came out literally a couple weeks ago. We're recording
right.
this near the end of October. And why do you think there is still such an enduring impact that Elvis has on people in general and the culture? I mean, it's been many decades since he passed away. What is it about Elvis and his music and his life do you think that still people are so fascinated by?
Well, if I knew that, then I would tap into the secret and I would try it myself. But no, I think he touched people's soul with his music. And I mean, unlike any other art, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of great artists. I mean, don't get me wrong, like the Beatles and the Who and the Beach Boys, all that stuff. But I mean, Elvis's music, he was the first. I mean, I
Hmm.
think he was the first one to go there and, break ground where all these other bands could come in and, follow his lead. So, but I think his music, his scope of music touched everybody in some
Hmm.
way. So, um,
I
it,
remember when we started
phenomenal
working
when I
on this
see,
book.
600,000 people go through Graceland every year, and it's, the second most visited place in the United States besides the White House. It's, it's phenomenal. And I'm sure Elvis is, kind of looking down, going, "Wow, I can't believe," because he always thought people would forget him when he passed away.
Wow. That's absolutely stunning to me that he would think that.
Yeah.
Even knowing how many people loved him during his lifetime, but I guess there's always that fear there that somebody's
Yeah.
gonna be forgotten.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, I've got a bunch of questions to dive into
Okay.
here today.
Okay.
And
These are all the Facebook people that
yeah,
send.
Facebook and some others.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Fire away.
Okay, I'm gonna let my mom have the honor of the first question here. So I
Okay.
asked her the other day, I said, "Hey, I'm doing this session with Billy. Do you have any questions?" And we did have a chapter or two in the Faith of Elvis book about this question, but I'm going to pose it to you anyway because we're recording this in October. This this conversation will release this later this week, and so we're getting into the holiday season. So my mom, Mary McIntyre, asked, "How did they celebrate Christmas at Graceland when you were growing up with Elvis?"
Christmas, that's our Christmases were that it's it's kind of hard to describe in a sense. And let me just say, get this out first, and then you'll understand. What I lived with a man that tried to make every day like Christmas. The
Hmm.
only difference was during Christmas season we had a tree, and that was it. But I mean, every day was like Christmas around Elvis. But a typical Christmas at Graceland was about 2 weeks before actual Christmas, we'd put up the tree. And so family and friends would be there and we'd decorate the tree. And it was always funny, when Priscilla was around, at the end we put the bulbs and the lights and all this, and it had a stand that the tree was in, and the tree would go around in a real slow circle and it had Christmas music playing. So we'd put the tinsel on at the end. And Elvis's thing about tinsel was you grab a handful and you throw it in the air and let it hit the tree. Priscilla was one strand at a time. So there was a big disagreement there about putting the tinsel on, but me, Rick, and David, we always followed Elvis's lead. But it was always funny because the next day we'd come back and look at the tree, and Elvis would always say, "Well, it looks like the tinsel fairy was here because a lot of what we put on was gone." So, uh, but that it was a big time for about 2 weeks before Christmas, and then that's when all the presents started going under, and Elvis would go Christmas shopping, and it was an awesome sight to see a tree with that many presents under it. So, and then he loved Christmas shopping.
What was that like going Christmas shopping with Elvis? So obviously you have a person here who has the means to buy some nice gifts for people, but then when you combine that with this immense generosity that you talked about in the book so much, that must have been just an absolute blast going shopping with him.
Yeah, I only got to do it once. I mean, that's when I got older. And he was funny because he would actually sit and take time and, he'd look at a shirt or something like that and say, this would really look good on so and so. And then, then he might just sit one time, this time I was with him, said, that looks pretty good on me. So he said, I'll keep this one. I'll
I think
get
I'll
him
take
another
one.
one. So yeah, I mean, he was fun to shop with, that's for sure. But I mean, he had his list of everybody that he was gonna, buy Christmas presents for, and I mean, he went through that list himself. I mean, he actually picked it out himself. So
Wow. That's
I thought
amazing.
I thought that was very cool of him to do that.
Okay, let me dive into I'm just it's going to seem like we're bouncing all over the room here with these
All
different
right.
questions. So, we have a as of the time of recording this, we have a national election coming up in a couple of weeks. So this question is interesting given sort of our current context. Was Elvis a Republican or Democrat? This was submitted by Shannon.
Yeah, good question, Shannon. I'll say this. Let me put it to you like this. The guy went and served his country when he didn't. I mean, he could have, if he wanted to, taken the easy way out, and but no, he went ahead and he was drafted. He went and served his country. He loved his country. I mean, it was God, country, and family, and that's the way it was in Elvis's order there. Um, that I mean, to make it at short, I mean, just to give a quick answer, he was a Republican. I mean, I remember back in the day, in the late '60s and '70s, people protesting and stuff, say, "Well, I'm going to leave this country." Was a firm believer in, you know, America, love it or leave it. And there
Hmm.
was a few people, like I think it was Jane Fonda or something, was going, I want to leave. I'll buy your. Elvis said, "I'll buy your plane ticket if you leave." I mean, that's the way he felt. If you didn't love if you didn't love it, then go try to pull that stuff some other country. You couldn't do it, and that's
Right.
why you never see any entertainer. They'll threaten it, but they never do. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but no, he loved this country, and I mean, you didn't say anything bad about it. I mean, Vietnam was going on at the time, and he made that one statement that he didn't think he'd just soon keep it private what his thoughts were,
Yeah.
but he wouldn't keep it private today. I mean, not the way the world has turned out. There's a big difference in the world in 1972 and 2024.
That's true. That's very
And
true.
no, he would definitely be talking right now. with the way the world is. I mean, it's just like we're on a slide. We're watching it go to hell and in a handbasket, and you know, that's the sad thing is, we've all got to do our part to try to, you know, get our country back the way it was.
And maybe that partially explains why Elvis continues to be so relevant is because there was a purity and a sincerity and a wholesomeness to what he did that people find a lot of solace and comfort in his music and his entertainment and what he stood for. Maybe that
Yeah.
explains part of why he's still so popular today.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a big part of it. I mean, you listen to his gospel music. I mean, I've had hardcore people tell me, I was never an Elvis fan until I heard his gospel album.
Hmm.
I mean, these are hardcore bikers and everybody else. I didn't really care for him, but I heard the gospel and that's gospel music. I really liked him. Okay,
Wow.
great. So,
Okay, here's a question from we're going to go on of a whole different direction here. Question
okay.
from Brenda. She said, "Did Elvis believe that Gladys's ghost guided him all the way to the end?"
I know for a fact that he always thought that his mother was with him in every step he took.
Hmm.
So, I mean, her clothes were still at Graceland. I mean, I saw them when shortly after we first moved to Graceland, Elvis took me, Ricky, and David on a tour of the house, and we went up to the basement, and there was this big electric train set there. We said, "Who's this?" He said, "This is mine." He said, my mom bought it for me after I became famous because she knew when I was growing up, I always wanted an electric train set, but they could never afford one. So
Hmm.
once he got Graceland, she bought him a big electric train set, and he kept it. It was in there, and her clothes was in there in the attic
Wow.
too, because we saw the clothes after our attention was taken away from the train set. We asked, "Whose clothes are these?" He said, "These are my mom's." And he said he couldn't bring himself to get rid of them. He that's something he couldn't do. So he kept them. And now there was a couple of times. I mean, there was one time in particular where I was sitting at when we first moved to Graceland. Vernon and I was watching the Late Late Show, not the Late Show, but the Late Late Show in the kitchen, and I heard footsteps. And Elvis was not home. I mean, it was just Vernon, my mom, me, Rick, and David, and that's who was at the house at the time. This was like 1961 or 1960. And I heard these footsteps, and I said, "Who's that?" Vernon said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I heard footsteps." No, you didn't hear anything. Okay.
Hmm.
A couple minutes later, I heard it again. I said, "Didn't you hear that?" No, no, nothing. So the third time I asked, he said, "Well," he said, "I'm just going to tell you this." He said, "Don't get scared." He said, "We think that's Elvis's mom. She checks in on him every now and then to make sure that he's doing okay." And when I told Elvis about it, he said, "Don't." He said, "Billy, ghosts aren't what you see in movies. They don't come back to do you harm or anything like that." He said,
Hmm.
"They come back just to check on you, make sure you're okay."
Wow.
He said, "You got nothing to worry about my mom. She would love you boys." Thank you. I mean, I'm only 7, 8 years old right here. I'm glad to hear that. So
So that never concerned you as a kid, thinking that there were possibly ghosts running around Graceland.
I
Uh,
grew up with the fact that, yeah, Gladys is there. Yeah, I mean, no, it didn't bother me at all. I
wow,
mean,
that's a beautiful story.
from what I understand, she was a great woman, and it was nice to have an extra set of eyes watching over you.
Yeah.
So
And probably as a kid, it maybe reinforces the idea of, hey, I've got somebody kind of watching me to make sure I don't misbehave too much, and
exactly,
that helps kind of to reinforce good behavior a little bit.
exactly.
That never hurts at all. Okay, here's a question from Brent, posted on Facebook. Did Elvis do his own Bible study on Sundays, since we know that he wasn't able to go to church? I know he was constantly reading the Bible, and I'm just referring to what he did instead of going to a church service. So, yeah, I'm curious about that as well.
Okay, well, here again, and we touched on it in the book. Elvis didn't go to church for one reason. if he went, the attention would have gone to him and not to the preacher, and he didn't want that.
Mhm.
But Elvis had a Bible study pretty much every day. I mean, 7 days a week. It wasn't just on Sundays, it was 7 days a week. I mean, I can't tell you how many times he would call me upstairs for something, and I would get up to his room, and he'd be sitting on his, bed or sitting at his desk, and I'd walk up and say, "Hey," and he'd just put his hand up, and he'd be reading. He might take a highlighter or a pen or something and mark what he was doing. And when he got finished, he'd say, "Okay." Then we start talking about whatever it was why he called me
Mm.
up to his room. And so, but I mean, this was every day. I mean, he was in the Bible every day. So he was 7 days a week.
Much more intensive than just going to church one time a week.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Wow.
sometimes it was funny because in a way he was like a Sunday school teacher for me, Rick and David too, when we was growing up. And the great thing about it was, when he was reading from the Bible, he would actually act out the parts. So when you have that kind of effect on you, okay, and he'd be speaking as Jesus, like, one, for instance, was when Jesus was preaching the Sermon on the Mount, and go ye and preach, the word, I mean, he acted it out, and it was very powerful. Whoa, okay, we got that lesson.
Here's a question related to that one.
Sure.
This one's a little bit more controversial, I think. Linda asks, my question would be, a lot of people question whether Elvis truly is in heaven due to how he read a lot of other books on other religions. And the book that he was reading the morning that he died, she says, I believe that you saw him in heaven. Do you think he made peace with God right before he passed? So it's kind of three or four questions wrapped into one, I guess.
Yeah, well, here again, we get into people want to they want to judge, go, okay, well, if he was a Christian, he did this, this, and this. There is no such, I'll tell you right now, there's no such thing as a perfect Christian. We're all fall short of being perfect. Elvis was not perfect. He'd be the first one to tell you. Now, I know what she's talking about, referring to some books that he read, uh, I guess as he was getting old, not older, but because this happened in like the 60s. But he did get into reading some stuff, but he turned back to Jesus.
Hmm.
I mean, same thing with Larry Geller. I mean, Larry Geller came in and was talking to him about these, Far Eastern philosophies and stuff like that. And he was interested because Elvis was interested in this because he thirst for knowledge on the Lord.
Mhm.
That, he firmly believed, there is a heaven and hell, and he was going to, it's like when Sammy Davis Jr. asked, he was wearing a Star of David and a cross at the same time. And Sammy Davis Jr. said, "Isn't that kind of a contradictory in terms?" And Elvis said, "I'm not going to miss heaven on a technicality." But yeah, he did read some stuff. And then I remember he burned some books too. And this is shortly after we moved to Graceland, because I just happened to be looking out my window, which was facing the backyard, and I saw a big old, kind of like a bonfire. He was throwing a bunch of books in there, and I'm sure it had something to do with some of the occult and stuff like that.
Wow.
Because if he was just curious, just like most people are. But then when he found out that it was leading him away from the Lord, then he'd get away from it.
Hmm.
Now, another thing to this lady's question was, in 1977, before Elvis passed away, when he was doing his last shows and stuff, he met with Rex Humbard and Oral Roberts. So he met with two of the biggest Baptist leaders you can think of, in 1977 before he passed away. And nobody was privy to those conversations because just Elvis and those people walked in the room.
Right.
So, I mean, do I know Elvis is in heaven? Yeah, I saw him there. Yeah. What people call a near death experience, I call a near God experience because I mean I saw heaven, so
And
and I
that's
know he's
that's
there.
exactly how the whole book opens. I mean, literally with that story.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he was curious, but I mean, if it led him away from the Lord, then he would he'd I wouldn't say really study it. He would just out of curiosity, read about it. And then if it took him away from what it says in the Bible, then he would put it aside or throw it away. Yeah. So I hope
Okay, got a
that,
couple questions about it. And thank you, by the way. Got a couple questions about the book here.
yeah.
Rachel asks, how did you come up with the title of your book and what inspired you to write it in the first place?
Well, the near death experience or near God experience is what inspired me to write it because, when I saw Elvis, I mean, we're just gonna kind of go through this pretty quickly. When I saw Elvis, it was only for a few seconds. I mean, it felt like a few seconds to me when I was actually dead. I was actually dead for 10 minutes. So after 5 minutes of no blood going to the brain, then you're dead. So,
Hmm.
that's when that stops all that. Well, it could have been a dream. No, it wasn't a dream. I know the difference between a dream and this. So when I saw him, I mean, he gave me a hug and said, "Great to see you." And then the next thing I know, it was like everything closed in on his face. It was getting darker. And he just said, before I left, he said, "Tell my family, my friends and fans, I love you. And I'll see you when you get here." I said, "Okay." So that right there kind of resonated with me. And I mean, then I heard God say, "No doubt, no fear." And like I said, in the book, the great thing about God, when he speaks to you, he doesn't have to explain what he
Hmm.
means by it. I knew immediately what he meant. No doubt, there is a heaven. No fear, this is where you'll be. So, um, you know, that's pretty much it right there.
And that was really the basis for what led you into doing this book in the first place, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I wrestled with it for almost, I mean, after that experience, for about 2 months almost. I mean, praying about what should I do with this, what was revealed to me. And then that same voice that said, "No doubt, no fear," said, "You're supposed to tell everybody, Billy." Okay. So that's when I told a few people, and somebody said, "Why don't you do a book?" Okay. And so, um, as we talked, everybody was back throwing titles out, and I just said, "What about the Faith of Elvis?" And okay, yeah, that sounds good. So that's how we went with it.
Now, I'm curious, maybe let's dive into some book and publishing stuff here for just a second.
Sure.
All the people listening who are interested in that side of things, because you had been involved in a couple of books before about Elvis.
Right.
So, what was your feeling on doing another book about Elvis, having been through that process before, working with a writer, going through the publishing? Were you excited about that, or did it more feel like a burden that, okay, I've got this message, but now I've got to go through this whole process again?
Well, first off, let's just go. This is the way I like to answer that question because everybody says, okay, the third book. Okay, yeah, the first one was too soon. The emotions were raw. I
Hmm.
mean, we weren't expecting, my brothers and I weren't expecting this onslaught of publishers just throwing themselves at us saying,
Hmm.
we do a book, do a book. It was too soon. We didn't, and I saw what they were kind of up to in that first book, Elvis, We Love You Tender. And when I saw what was going on, that they was exploiting Elvis and my brothers and I and Elvis, I shut up halfway through the book. I'm not talking anymore about. I'm not saying
Hmm.
anything else about him because they were trying to do the sensationalism. Now, I was in no shape to write a book at that time. I was still grieving. I mean, this was maybe a year after Elvis had passed away
Hmm.
when they approached us, and I was still. It took me. I'm still grieving for it, but I mean, at least I know how to deal with it. Before I didn't, so that's when I turned to alcohol and drugs. And when I wrote that book, I was not in the best shape. And it comes. I mean, if anybody has read it, that they can attest to. Yeah, well, you was a different person then. Yes, I was. And so that's why I did the book Elvis, My Brother,
Hmm.
was to, okay, I shut up during this part. So I just decided to take it a little bit further and, okay, talk about Elvis and my relationship. And that's what it was about. And I still wasn't happy because in the first two books, they wouldn't let us talk about the spiritual side or Elvis's faith in those two books. They didn't want to hear it. No, we don't want to hear that. We want to hear the other stuff. So after this experience that I had, I said, okay, now this is what this book is going to be all about. And that's it. I mean, it wasn't all about the faith of Elvis. We talk about a lot of the great things that help,
Right.
sometimes I had with Elvis and stuff. But a lot of I mean, the publishers before they didn't want to hear that. They wanted to hear okay, give us the dirt, and I was like, no. And that's why with this publisher here, I'm thankful that they came on board and said, no, we want to make your dream come true. And I said,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
So that's how this all came about. It took a long process to get there, because I really wasn't on board with the faith part in the first one, but the second book I was, and but they didn't want to hear it. So in this last attempt at doing the last one I'm going to ever do on Elvis is, I'm thankful that they came on board and said, we want to make sure that, your dream comes true on this one.
Yeah. So you feel like at this point you've pretty much said everything that you have to say about Elvis and your relationship with Elvis and your experience with him. I mean, are there more stories yet to tell at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's every day. I mean, I'm living back in Memphis again. So, I can drive down a street and see, and all of a sudden a memory comes to me. I mean, there's 17 years locked away up here. I mean, and I mean, what we've only done is we've revealed maybe this much of everything that's inside my head. So there's a lot more that can be told, but I don't know if I want to do it anymore because, you know, I think we did a great job on the last book, The Faith of Elvis, and I think I'd rather just leave it at that, right there. I don't mind sharing stories on Facebook, which I'm more than happy to do. And just whenever the memories come to me, or I can listen to if I hear an Elvis song, a memory will come to me, or if I see a TCM and there's an Elvis movie, I'll sit and if I watch it, that's when they start coming back to me. And, I'll sometimes I'll put it down on my note in my phone and, share a story or something like that with the fans on Facebook.
There is a book about Elvis that I don't know if it exists, and I wish that it existed because I would go out and buy a copy. And that is a book about Elvis and his cars, because I know that's a particular love of yours. For me, those were some of the most fun sections of the book to work on,
Well,
because you would tell the story, and then I've got to, as the writer, I kind of have to frame it a certain way. And I'm thinking, I wish there was a book, a huge picture book that had
yeah.
all these pictures of Elvis and his cars, and you're a mechanic, you know about all that side of stuff, and I wish that book existed
Well,
because I
I've
that would be
kind
so
of
much fun.
I've kid around on Facebook and said, my next book will be called Riding with Elvis, and talk about all the cars.
Oh, there you go, Billy.
You find
What
us
an incredible book idea.
find a publisher and we'll do that book. I promise you. How about
Gosh,
that?
that would be fun.
Yeah, it
That
would
would be
be
so
because
much fun.
those were the best. I mean, that was the bond that Elvis and I shared. I mean, he saw that when I was like 7 years old. I mean,
Hmm.
he got me a little model car. It was already put together. It was I think it was a Cadillac, and I played with that little car, and it was like 1/24th scale, and it was perfect. I mean, I love playing with that car. I used to
Hmm.
roll it down, the hill at the front of Graceland. I just get out there and let it roll down that hill, run down and catch it. So I didn't want to scratch it up or anything. I thought it was so cool. And when he saw that, he took me under his wing and started teaching me about cars and about racing and all that
Hmm.
stuff. And that was the bond that he and I shared together. And I'm thankful I had him, in my life because of all the things him and Vernon both. I mean, Vernon, he loved cars too. And I mean, Liz and I, we counted about a year ago how many cars between the time I was 15 and up until I was about 18 or 19, how many cars I had. And at between 15 and 19, I think I had like 16 or 17 cars.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Vernon was also an avid car collector. And I mean, at one point he did have a used car lot dealership here in Memphis. And so he would bring, I would always have a car, pretty much to drive, but he would get these cars. I mean, my first car that I ever had was a 57 Chevy, and he traded two bird dogs that he had at Graceland for it. So that was where it started. Then
Hmm.
I'd start fixing the cars up. Once I get it kind of close to where I wanted, he would trade it off and get another one, and then I'd have to start it all over again. So, and I finally asked him when I turned 18, because that's when I started buying my own cars. I said, "Why did you do that? You know, I had some nice cars, and I was just getting them fixed up the way I wanted them." He said, "Do you know how to work on cars?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You just answered your own question." Thank you, Daddy. Thank you. Now I get it.
You ever watch Jay Leno's Garage? That show?
Yeah, all the time. I try to watch it as much as possible. Yeah,
Has
but
he ever done an episode on Elvis's cars or anything?
don't think so. Yeah,
That
I know when the book was on a promotional tour, I tried to tell the people that was in charge of the publicity. I said, "Why don't you get in touch with Jay Leno? I mean, the guy, he's got a car collection, and I mean,
oh my
Jay
gosh.
Leno and Elvis would have had a lot in common because Elvis had a love for cars. I mean, his love for the passion he had was so strong. Because I remember I asked him once, how come you have so many cars?" He said, "Billy, I got a car for any mood that I want." He said, "Depending on what kind of, if I'm feeling nostalgic," he had a 53 panel truck that they used to, there wasn't, the garbage didn't come by and pick up at Graceland. The guys like Mike McGregor and Uncle Earl, they would load up the trash in this 53 panel truck and take it to the landfill. And when I got a little bit older, I'd ride with him, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And then, but they were thinking about getting rid of it. Elvis said, "No, no, no, no." And he had it completely redone. I mean, painted black, and it looked like it just came off the showroom in 1953. It didn't even have a radio in it. It had a heater, and that was it. But I mean, this thing was so nice. And I asked him, "Why do you have that?" He said, "When I want to be nostalgic," he said, it looks like a little bit like the truck I used to drive for Crown Electric."
Hmm.
And he said, I can get out in this and nobody knows, nobody even look at him, because that 53 panel, I mean, he would today. I mean, because you see that driving around, everybody's going to stop and look at that. But 60s, late 60s and early 70s, nobody paid any attention to it. And if he wanted to go fast, he always had one of the supercars. I had to teach you the difference between supercar and muscle car. Muscle car is American. Supercar is,
Hmm.
Pantera and Ferrari. So, but yeah, whenever he wanted to go fast, we'd ride in that, or he'd get in one of my cars and go for a ride. He would take it. He'd always want to take it for a spin just to see how fast it was. Okay, well, it's faster than you want to go. And he'd start laughing.
I
"Give me those keys. Let's see how fast it'll go." Okay, so
wonder what Elvis would think about all the electric car revolution today, all the Teslas and other kinds of things. Would he be interested in that, you think?
now it's got to sound like a car when you when you set
Not
it up.
silent.
No, 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 no. Well, he he wouldn't mind if if people wanted to buy one for themselves or something like that, but he wouldn't like it when the government's trying to say, "No, this is what you're going to drive."
Right.
No, that
Right.
ain't, no, the government isn't supposed to tell you what you're going to drive, what you're supposed to say, or no, no, no. That you work for us. It's not the other way around.
Right. Right.
So sorry, we had to dip back into the politics thing again.
Well, it's an unavoidable part of life these days. So,
Yeah,
okay. Next question was submitted by, thanks for that little jaunt down Car Lane, though. That's fun.
yeah.
I love that stuff. Next question is submitted by Tracy. She says, we've heard that Elvis had a really good sense of humor. What was his favorite prank, or did he have a favorite joke?
Uh, well, there was a lot. I'm trying to think of one that I could share. The best prank ever was, it was in Vegas in 1972. And he pulled this on J.D. Sumner and the Stamps Quartet. Uh, I didn't know this, but when I first started working for Elvis, it was like some of the guys sometimes would tell us, or I would hear that Elvis had death threats in pretty much every city we went to when we was on tour.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
he got a lot of death threats, and so we were in Vegas, and so uh, we kind of played it up that, okay, yeah, we got a death threat and we're going to, we took it. Everybody was playing it up that we was taking it serious. And we all had parts that we were supposed to play during this prank, in which we did. And when, as the story unfolds, you'll hear what we all did. So it was after the second show in Vegas. So Red and Sonny mysteriously disappear. I mean, there's everybody standing around talking, and you didn't, nobody missed them. So the next thing we know, we hear a knock at the back door, like how the food would, that's usually when the food would come up after the second show and stuff like that, if he felt like eating. So somebody went and answered the door. And you heard this voice, "Where's Presley?" And you hear bam, bam, two gunshots go off. And then you see these two guys come running from around. One comes running from the hallway, and the other one runs to the kitchen and comes out where the dining room is. So you got a gun pointed at you from over to the right, and you got one over on the left. And you see these guys in ski masks, and they got these guns pointed, and they start shooting. So when that starts, we all had our parts. I was sitting in a chair. Elvis was sitting on a couch here in front of me over here, and we're kind of sitting in front of the TV. I hit my chest and I kicked the chair over backwards. And so I'm kind of laying there off to the side and I'm watching as everything unfolds. And Elvis, he yells, "They got me." He falls forward, and JD Sumner jumps on top of him. And we're kind of looking, and we see Ed Enoch is behind the bar, and he can't see what he's doing, but he's just throwing bottles and glasses over the bar, hoping to hit somebody. Well, we saw that. We start laughing, and JD thought Elvis was going into convulsions because he was laughing. Finally, the laughter overtook everybody's fear, and they were all looking at each other like, and Red and Sonny pulled the mask off, and they just, oh my, JD and that D, "Oh my God, Elvis, you almost killed me with a heart attack on down." We're laughing so hard. It was, I mean, for 30 minutes, we sat there and laughed for 30 minutes solid, just with what we saw, everybody, Donnie Sumner, Bill Black, all these guys, what they were doing when all this was playing out. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I just, yeah, Elvis. I mean, that was probably the best prank I've ever seen in my life, right there.
Wow. That's
I mean,
amazing.
because we all had our parts, and everybody that was working for Elvis, we played it like we got shot. Everybody was falling, and it was perfect.
Wow. Love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, next question is from Angel. Now you and I have had some couple discussions about this topic, and I'm curious about this too. Uh, she says, "I heard that you and David are working on a new film project. Do you know when that will be out?" And so I'll kind of follow that up with, what do you think about some film projects related to the book, or are you guys working on some stuff, or what's the status of all that, or what can you
David
say?
doesn't David doesn't tell me everything that's going on with that. It's
Okay.
just kind of like, and I'm at the point where, okay, if it happens, let me know, and I'll be glad to help. Yeah, yeah. Would I love to see a movie made of the Faith of Elvis? Yeah, because I mean, it would be the first movie that ever really showed the real Elvis, because nothing that's ever been done has really showed the real Elvis.
Hmm.
I mean, everything that I've seen, and I've pretty much seen them all, especially, the Priscilla, the first one she did, and then, this Baz movie, and then I saw Elvis and the Beauty Queen, which was from Linda, and, you know, the one with Kurt Russell in it, Elvis, or I don't really remember what it was, and everybody raves over that movie, but none of them showed the character that was revealed in The Faith of Elvis.
Hmm.
They only show the historical stuff, and what I mean by that is, okay, he played this concert and this date, and he went in and recorded this date and at Sun Records, and then he became. I mean, the stuff everybody already knows about.
Hmm.
Okay, let's do a movie based on what you didn't see, the guy that I knew. That's what I would like, that's what I would love for the fans to see, I mean, give them a perspective, see it from my perspective is, okay, you're growing up with this guy right here, the king of rock and roll, the greatest entertainer in the whole world is your older brother. Let's show that guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fun, I mean, like that story I just shared with, the prank. There's plenty of those, or just riding around Memphis and the conversations we had, I mean, going to Elvis when you're growing up as a teenager and what do you do when when you take a girl out on a date and stuff like that, and he tells you, you know, I mean, that's the kind of stuff the fans want to hear about. They don't want to
Yep.
hear about other stuff. They already know that. They've seen the guy that's in the movies and done the records. They want to see the guy that's off the stage.
So really the answer to the question is we'll know something whenever you know something, maybe.
If something
At
ever
some
come
point.
up, yeah, but I don't see anybody knocking on my door or calling me up and say, "Hey, let's do a movie." I wish they would. I'd be more than happy to sit down with them and say, "Okay, well, I'll show you an Elvis that nobody's ever seen before."
And also I would also add that with movies and film projects or documentaries or streaming series, I mean that world is so complex and there's so many people involved that I'm
Yeah.
surprised anything ever gets off the ground in that world.
Well, just in some of the conversations I've had, and I've had a few myself, and the biggest thing that comes back is, well, the market's saturated. The Elvis market is saturated. I went saturated with, I can't say, a bunch of,
Saturated with what?
yeah, that's not the real Elvis, though. I mean, but see, you can't tell these people that because, they think they're experts. You
Right.
may be an expert filmmaker, but you're not an expert on Elvis. Let me just say that.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't even consider myself an Elvis expert. So, there was only one expert really, and that was Elvis and his mom. So.
Yeah. Okay, next question is from Lori. She says, "Hey Billy, I know how much you boys loved Elvis, but did you ever have a big disagreement or a fight?" So I'm curious. I'm sure there's lots of good stories here, but
It was not, no, we never fought. I listened. Elvis was probably the first person I ever really listened to. And when I say that, when he told me to do something, I did it. I didn't ask questions or anything like that. But the only time there was any hint of a disagreement was this when I turned 18 years old. And I went to fill out my draft form. And Vernon went with me. And we're sitting there and I'm filling it out. And me being a Christian, I didn't believe in killing. I said, "How do you spell conscientious objector?" So me and him figured it out. I wrote that on there, turned it in. 2 days later, I'm sitting in Graceland and somebody says, "Elvis wants to see you upstairs." I jump up and run upstairs. I get to the top of the stairs and he's standing there. He's got this black crushed velvet suit on with a cape. He's got his cane. He's got, he's got this uh, American flag on his lapel right here that's diamonds and rubies, and I don't know what the bluestones were. And just as I'm about to get to the top step, he puts that cane right in my chest, stops me. I go, "What? What?" He said, "What's this I hear about you writing conscientious objector on your draft notice?" I said, "Elvis, I just put that on there to let them know my thoughts on, I don't believe in killing." He said, "Well, that's good." He said, "But he said, do you think you're better than those guys that's over there serving right now?" I said, "No, no, no, Elvis." And he evidently he got the wrong idea.
hmm.
And so he kept pushing me. And I said, "Elvis, no, wait a minute. Let me explain this." I said, "If they draft me, I will go. Gladly, I would never do anything to dishonor my family or my country. I would never do that." And he said, "Well, it's good to hear." He said, "Because I'm seeing all these hippie protesters on TV and stuff like that, and they're burning their draft cards and moving to Canada." And I said, "Elvis, I would never do that." I said, "You served your country. My dad was a war hero. I would never do that." I said, "I only put that on there just as to let them know my beliefs. If they draft me, I will go. And if it comes down to me going and me dying for my country, I'm going to do it with pride, Elvis. I
Hmm.
promise you that." And when I started explaining that to him, he eased up a little bit and said, "Okay." He said, I was just afraid, Billy, that I know your hair is long like all these people I see out there." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "But Elvis, who also raised me?" And I pointed to him like that. He said, I didn't think of it like that. I said,
Hmm.
I would never do anything to dishonor you, Elvis. I would never do that, or my country. He said, okay, what were you doing before I called you up? I'm just downstairs watching TV. He said, well, go on back down and watch TV. And I turned around and he kicked me in the butt. I would turn around and look back. Yeah, I just want to make sure. I said, okay, whatever, Elvis. And that was it. That was the only disagreement we ever really had. And it wasn't really, I mean, it was just a misunderstanding is all it was. He didn't know why I'd written conscientious
Hmm.
objector.
Okay, next question is from Sue. She says, during all of your long discussions about life with Elvis, what was the discussion that stands out the most for you?
I remember when I was about 18, 19 years old. And, this was early 70s. And, it wasn't as bad as it is today. But I mean, we were going through a lot of stuff back in the 70s. Vietnam was slowly coming to an end and all this stuff. And, there was assassinations and stuff like this. And I said, can I talk to you for a minute? He said, yeah. And I said, can we talk alone? He said, yeah. He said, come on, let's go up to my room. So we went up to his room. I said, Elvis, with the way the world is today, I said, it seems like it's crazy. He said, he said, um, let me give you a little word of advice. He said, I call this uh I forgot, I'll think of it here in just a minute. But what he said was, Billy, called the universal law of insanity, is what he called it.
Hmm.
That he said, once you realize that you're crazy and so is everybody in the whole world, he said, then you'll be able to get along with everybody.
That's so
But
true.
I went, wow, okay. He said, because he said, trust me, he said, there's not a thought that's gone through your head that somebody else hadn't thought it also. He said, I know a lot of young people think that, they're the only ones going through certain situations when they're not. He said, everybody's got the crazy thoughts and everything like that. He said, but at the end of the day, if you go about your life with this, if you love everybody like you would your brothers and sisters, like they are your brothers and sisters, the world will become a
Hmm.
better place for you. And when he told me that, that's when a little light came on in my head, and I went, you know what? That's the attitude I'm going to take. And I did. And now sometimes you might want to shake that person that you're sitting there trying to get your point across to, but no, if you just look at them and just talk to them like you would a brother or sister, you can always work out the differences that way, instead of having to fight over it. So
Yeah,
I
that's a beautiful
adopted that.
perspective.
Yeah, I just adopted that attitude, and when I did that, it did become a lot easier for me. I mean, sure, do I get frustrated? Sure, everybody does. But you just have to, I mean, this is where you have to draw on that inner strength that he always told me that everybody has inside of. It may
Mhm.
take all you have to bring up that courage to say no, or don't say anything at all, or whatever, or just walk away. It takes a bigger man to do that than it does to stand there and fight somebody over something stupid. So, okay, let's agree to disagree and just move on, forget it. So once I adopted that, life did become a lot easier for me.
Here's a question that this is the only person who submitted a question on this topic. I'm surprised because uh, you actually had a couple of things in the book about this. Rocky asks, I know that Elvis really loved his guns, as I do. I'd love to hear some good gun stories about Elvis.
Well, yeah, he would love to do target shooting at Graceland. Now, when people go through Graceland now, the one thing you don't see is like when if you're standing in the backyard and you're looking toward Vernon's office, you'll see two doors to the right side of that. Well, on the right side of that, on the inside of the fence, there used to be this, I forgot how many gallons it stood about maybe 4 foot tall and maybe 10 foot long, but it was a gas pump. And that's what they
Mm.
would use to gas up the tractors and everything else to mow the yard in and around Graceland. But Vernon was always scared that, somebody accidentally hit that. He said, we're going to blow up everybody on this hill. It's this house, and everybody on it will be gone if you do that. But one time we were out there shooting, and Elvis wanted to shoot his Thompson submachine gun. And go get it for me, Billy. So I ran up to his room, brought it back down. I couldn't believe he was going to shoot this thing, but he did. I mean, he only shot like 4 or 5 rounds, and that thing going off, it sounded like a cannon. Bam, bam,
I
bam, bam.
can imagine.
And it's kind of started rearing up on him. And when it did, he let go of the trigger real quick. Because luckily he knew enough about guns. Once that thing starts going, it's just going to keep going if you hold your finger. And he had it on full auto. It wasn't single shot. He had it push that switch down, and he had the big old drum clip on it. Da, 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 5 rounds came out of it. That fast. And it was like, good grief. Vernon come running out of the office. You're going to kill us all. Because you can't really aim. I mean, you can point it in a direction, but you're not really aiming at anything. You just it was meant to you come up on trench warfare back in World War I, where you just kind of spray down in the trench. That's all it was for. So you wasn't really doing any aiming. And that's why when I take people through Graceland now, you walk through and then you come out the door. And if you turn around, they got the targets inside the doorway, which that's not the way it was. We had them on the door, because if
Okay.
you stand out in the middle of the yard and you look back at it, you can't see the target because it's inside, but we had it on the door. So I point out these big chunks of brick that I mean, they've painted over it, but you can still see the holes for those 45 caliber rounds hit those bricks. And I mean, there's big holes right there. And I always I said, see that right there and see that right there? There's 3 of them I point out. There's about 3 or 4 of them right there. And I point them out and said, that's where he shot the Thompson submachine gun.
Hmm.
And Vernon, his biggest fear was that 45, if it would have hit that gas drum over there, it would, like I said, it would have just blown that house and everybody else. It'd have been gone. And that's the only time when we was actually shooting that the police actually did show up at Graceland. We got a call maybe about 20, 30 minutes later. Somebody come out and said, the police are down front. I said, tell them come on back. So they were in the car. They drove up to the backyard and said, sorry to bother you, Mr. Presley, but we got a complaint. He said, oh, we were shooting a gun. He said, but I pulled out my Thompson. He said, go get it, Billy. I went and got it, showed it to him. They was, wow, you got a Thompson submachine gun. He said, yeah, you're here. You might as well shoot a couple rounds. No, no, no. It's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. He said, well, I promise I'm not going to shoot anymore, guys. He said, but I just had to test fire it one time just to see what it was like. And they just said, oh, it's a great gun, but please don't do it anymore. He said, I promise we won't. See, we never got any complaints with, shooting the pistols and stuff. It's just that Thompson, like I said, it sounded like a cannon going off when you fired that thing. And it was, oh my God. It
Wow.
was something to see.
Okay, we got a handful of more questions here, and I'm
Sure.
sorry we can't get to all the questions. We'd be here for 6 hours if we did. This question is about his movie career. Ruth asked, "Was there a movie that he didn't like?" My guess is there was probably more than one, but any particular
Yeah,
ones
I
that he mentioned?
saw every one of them. The only one that he actually watched, and I watched it with him, was um, Elvis on Tour.
He didn't watch his other movies, like he literally never saw them.
No, 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 no. I mean, he had every one of his movies were at Graceland. Shortly, probably about a month or so after he finished filming it, they would mail him a copy 16 millimeter film. It had 2 reels, and as you go down the stairs when you're going to the basement, that's the one where you see the mirrors on both sides. When you get to the bottom of the stairs, if you look forward, and most of the people that's been through Grayson can attest that what they see there is that they'll see like a security person or somebody sitting there, but they see this open room behind them. That was the projection room. That's where all the Elvis's movies were stored, and there was a 16 millimeter projector in there, where when you sit and look at the bar, you see this little window looks like one of the old movie theater windows. It was just a little small one because that's all it needed was just that.
Hmm.
So, and if you look, then you look at the three TV screens, there's a big screen that you could pull down, and when you pull that down, then you could watch the movies. In fact, when we was growing up, uh, most of our birthdays, me, Ricky, and David, when we'd have birthdays, we would have some of our friends come over from school, and we'd go to Graceland and we'd watch the movie, watch one of the newest Elvis movie. So that was how we celebrated our birthdays. But no, because I asked him, I said, "You don't watch any of it?" No, he said, I don't like them. I mean, like, especially he was really looking forward to doing the movie Charo because it was going to be kind of like a spinoff on the spaghetti westerns that
Hmm.
Clint Eastwood was doing because he wanted to do one like that. It's because there wasn't going to be any singing in this movie, and he was all right. He's going to get to do some acting here. But what disappointed Elvis the most was he said he would tell us about the movies when he would come home. And after he filmed this one, he was looking forward to it before he left, but then when he came back, he was telling us why he was disappointed. He was disappointed in instead of shooting the bad guy in the movie, Colonel Parker said, "No, you can't do that. Just give him a dirty look." So in the movie, you see Elvis, he'll reach for his gun, but all he does is give the guy a dirty look. And it just, that upset him so bad. It was like it drained the life out of it. I mean, that's pretty much what it did, those movies. And uh, then he did that 68 singer special. I can't say comeback special because there's a story that goes with that one. There was Elvis was signing autographs down at the gate. And this lady said, "I loved your 68 comeback special." He said, "Comeback, sweetie, I never left." He said, "Well, I didn't go anywhere," you know. So that's why I can't say comeback special because he was right. He never went anywhere. He's been there the whole time. It's just, he finally got out of the movie contract, which Colonel Parker in his infinite wisdom, when he came out of the army, said, "Okay, we're going to get him back out there in front of all the fans again. We're going to sign a three movies a year deal for 7 years and a soundtrack that goes with
Hmm.
it." Now, you know, and he got disappointed in, he was glad to be back working again and everything, but his true love was being there in front of the fans performing live. And so when the movie contract deal was up, that was it. That's why they did the the singer special in 1968 to see if there was even still any interest in
Hmm.
Elvis because the Beatles and everybody else was going.
Right.
They wanted to kind of test the waters, and so he did that. And then he did Vegas in 1969, and I was there, and it was like, wow, I'd seen Elvis before. I mean, the first time I saw him perform live was in 1961. It was at the Ellis Auditorium. I was 8 years old at the time. I was too young to understand what was going on. I mean, it was all quiet, and we was up in this theater seating, and I'm looking down from the balcony, and I see all these people. My brothers and I were just kind of looking around at all the people. As soon as he hit that stage, everybody just started screaming, and the women just ran toward the stage, and I couldn't hear anything afterwards. And I kind of looked back at Vernon, and he just kind of gave me a wink that, yeah, that's what they're supposed to do. Okay. So I just kind of sit there and I was, trying to move a little bit to the music, but I couldn't really hear it. But in 1969, when he came back for the first time, I saw that show, and because I wanted to go to Woodstock. Elvis is going to be a bunch of old people and this and that. So before the show starts, I'm looking around, I'm seeing all these entertainers and all age groups were there. I thought it was just going to be old people, but I mean, from kids, I mean, teenagers and even younger, all the way up to senior citizens. I was like, okay, this might be all right. He come out, and I mean, I think I took one breath during his whole show. When he hit that stage, my brothers and I just kind of looked at each other and went, "Who is this guy? I've never met him before."
We don't recognize him.
Yeah, he looks just like our brother, but man, who is he? And I mean, I was just, right then and there is when I really realized who Elvis really was then.
Hmm.
That's what the first time I really, it dawned on me who this guy really was. And by that time, I mean, I'd been there 9 years and it was still Elvis, but I'd never seen him like that. And I mean, I've been to a lot of concerts, but during that time and since that time, but I've never seen any show like this before in my whole
Hmm.
life. I was just, wow. Now I know why they call him the king. I was just, like I said, I took one breath maybe during that whole show. My jaw was on the table. I'm just sitting, what my mouth wide open like an idiot. What, who is this? It was great.
Wow. Love that. Love that. Now, speaking of performing, this is sort of a related question to that.
Okay.
Joan asked a great question. What do you think Elvis would think of all those trying to perform like him? And she emphasizes, I did say trying. I think that probably should be in quotes. So I'm curious, Billy, what did Elvis think of all the tribute artists and people who are, performing as Elvis and whatnot?
Well, it's funny you said that. There's a series of photos that's kind of like on Facebook, and I just started working for Elvis in 1972, and we were in LA. We stayed there for a little bit, and then before we went to Vegas. And I happened to be outside this one day, and I saw this guy that was trying to dress like him. Had his home hair combed and had the glasses and all this stuff. And I said, "Man, Elvis got to see this." I walked in. I said, "Elvis, you won't believe this, but there's some guy at the gate, and he's doing his best to try to look like you." Okay, I got to see this. He takes his pistol and tucks it in his back of his pants. So we're walking up there, and there's the one picture you see of Elvis. He's walking, and he's got his hand behind his back, and he's got his cigar on the other. And people say, "Well, he's just smoking a cigar." Yeah, no, his gun was back there. So as he and I are walking together, he's a couple of steps ahead of me, and he kind of motions for me to come take the gun. So I walk up behind him real quick and take it and sticking it behind my pants. And we're standing there. And he talks to the guy for probably about 10 or 15 minutes. And I wasn't paying attention to what they were saying. I was just kind of watching all the other fans standing there, making sure everybody's behaving themselves, not trying to do any harm to him. And so as we're walking away, I said, "What do you think about that?" He said, "Billy, that famous saying," he said, "what is it? This a serious form of what is it now? It's
So something about the biggest compliment is a form of flattery or something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah. Somebody's trying to imitate you is the most sincere form of flattery." He said, "As long as he's doing it for the right reason for the fans," he said, "I got no problem with it." He said, "But when they start thinking they're me or carry it even further than that," I said, "Yeah, you don't have to tell me, Elvis, I
Hmm.
know." So no, he wouldn't mind as long as it's like I said, as long as everybody's doing it for the right reason. But I mean, I've seen a few that they weren't doing it for the right reason, and I mean, like I said, I've seen a few, and but it's hard for me to see these guys to go to their shows, and I've been to a couple, just out of being courteous to the entertainer and stuff like that. I went to the show, but it's hard for me because it brings back a lot of great memories and stuff like that. I mean, but they're never as close as what the real thing was. I mean, they never will be. I don't care who what they've done. I mean, I've heard of some of these guys having surgery and this and that. I even heard about one that had his name changed and had his wife's name changed to Priscilla. And when I saw that
Wow.
one, I said, "You might want to read a little bit more about Elvis and him and Priscilla. What happened with that deal? I don't know if you want to go with that."
Maybe he didn't know his history very well.
Yeah, maybe not, but I mean, if the fans like it, that's fine. That's good. More power to them. But I mean, like I said, I've seen a few that were pretty good. And more power to them.
Okay, I've got I think three or four more questions here.
Okay,
A couple of these are not from anybody. These are just kind of conversation points I wanted to throw in there that I
sure.
thought would be of interest to Elvis fans. So one was that you and I have talked offline about I had made a note to myself the Dr. Nick story about, prescription drugs and possible cover up, and how, you guys did a deposition. So if you could share that story, I think that would be interesting for people who are curious
Um,
about all that.
Shortly after Elvis passed away, this was when Vernon was still alive. I mean, before it did end up going to a federal grand jury, but uh, me, Rick, and David were summoned to give a deposition on what, what had happened. I mean, I guess the police, or there was some type of investigation going on. I really wasn't clear. All I know is they said, you got to be there to give a deposition. I went, yes, sir. And this wasn't Vernon, because Vernon and my mom, they'd already gone through a divorce by that time. But they summoned us to go. We had to go to the courthouse. And so, me, Rick, and David, the night before, we were supposed to give our depositions. We kind of sat and said, okay, what are we going to do? And we all three agreed we're going to lay out everything we know about Dr. Nick and Dr. Gunham, and there's others that, Dr. Newman, all these other people.
Mhm.
We was just going to lay it out there and say, this is what we saw. So the three of us get there at the same time, and we see the elevator and the doors are starting to close, and we just, yell, hey, 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 and then we see a hand and they stop it. We get on the elevator. It happened to be Vernon and his attorney.
Hmm.
And so Vernon is kind of shocked. He said, what are you boys doing here? Well, we were told we were supposed to be here, and we're supposed to be giving depositions. He said, what are you going to say? And that's when I said, we're going to tell them everything we know. That's when Vernon stops talking and this attorney starts and says, you're not going to give any information at all. You're just going to answer yes or no, and you don't volunteer any information. Do you understand that? And me, Rick, and David kind of look at each other, and we look at Vernon, and Vernon wouldn't even look at us. He just kind of turned his head a little bit like that. We're going, oh man, what is this? So we get in there and they start asking questions. And there were several times when they had asked me, Rick, or David. I mean, we all three had to testify, and we all had to sit in there while we was doing this. And we'd kind of look over at Vernon, and he wouldn't look at us. But the attorney would look at us and just kind of shake his head a little bit, like, and we couldn't give any information, because if we would have told what we knew and what we were going to do,
Hmm.
he would have been practicing medicine ever again. Now, I heard later in life that, he got caught for doing pretty much the same thing with Jerry Lee Lewis or something like that. I mean, I didn't keep up with Dr. Nick after Elvis passed away. To me, all that stuff was gone. And so I really don't know what happened after that. But I just know that this instance right here was something that, and I only came up with this. I was at work about 2 months ago, and one of my friends at work asked me some stuff, just asked kind of this, and I'd forgotten all about this stuff until he said this, and I was sitting there and I went, of all I've got regrets in my life. This is probably one of them. Well, there was two, and I'll mention the second one, the first one after this one. I should have gone in there and done what the three of us planned to do to begin with, and not paying attention to what this attorney was saying to us. And it may have stopped a lot of things that happened. Here again, I don't know what all the things that happened afterwards, but I know this case about Dr. Nick. I don't have any grudges or anything like this, but this man helped put Elvis where in that grave.
Mm-hmm.
And I regret not sitting there and open up and telling everything but I guess out of the respect from Vernon that I still had for him, because I grew up with this man as my father, and I pretty much did what he didn't say it, but the attorney said it. So I pretty much just had to sit there and bite my tongue the whole time, and I regret doing that. The first one was at Elvis's funeral when Colonel Parker, my brothers and I, after we put Elvis in the mausoleum, everybody was standing around Graceland. We just happened to be standing around front at the front steps. I don't know why. And he comes walking up. He's got his cigar in his mouth and his stupid cap that he always wore. like a Hawaiian shirt. He said, if you any of you boys get any contracts, anything like that, don't sign anything till I look at it. The show must go on. I came that close to punching him out right
Wow.
there. I almost decked him. And I mean, that's my first regret right there. I wish I would have, but I said, this is Elvis's funeral. You can't do this right here, Billy. But I wish I would have now. So those are the two regrets that, come to mind when I think about my life with Elvis, that I wish I would have went ahead and acted on those impulses. So,
It's interesting. We were talking before we hit record about how this whole thing with prescription drugs seems to be an epidemic with with celebrities. You have Prince, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, probably a lot of others,
yeah, I
where
mean,
they're being prescribed these things that ultimately lead to their death.
yeah, I mean, these are the only ones we know about. I'm sure there's others
Right.
that they passed away and they just simply pass it off as a drug overdose or something like that.
Right.
But,
Right.
these entertainers, I mean, just like they're like anybody else. I used to have that kind of faith in doctors too, but after three shoulder surgeries on this one right here, I finally figured it out that doctors at best are just nothing but shade tree mechanics. You know your
Mhm.
body better than they do. So I don't sit there and blindly listen to what well, take this and not feel,
Right.
no, I'm not taking anything else, doc. Okay. No. I've been down that road before. And my trust in doctors is not the highest in the world, you know, but I do listen to my heart doctor, and I mean, he's not a quack. So, you know,
I do want to ask about a book that just came out. We were talking about this a little bit before I hit record.
yeah,
So I know that you have not read the new book
yeah.
by Lisa Marie and her daughter Riley. Um, can you explain? I think people would be interested to hear why you don't have an interest in reading that book and your thoughts on that in general.
Okay. But the easy way for me to explain this thing is first is that was my niece. I mean, there's a picture of me, Rick, and David holding her the first day she came back, when she came back from the hospital to Graceland for the first time. That was Elvis's daughter, and that little girl means the world to me. And from what I'm hearing from the fans, what she's written, what her life was like without Elvis, it crushes, it breaks my
Mm,
heart to know that her mom probably told her all these stories about Elvis and all this, and she probably made up a lot of them and lied about her dad, because I mean, the little girl seemed so confused about who her dad really was. She didn't get the privilege that me, Rick, and David had, spending the 17 years with him. She only had 9 years. And I mean, she was just getting that relationship going. I mean, because
mhm.
in all reality, she wasn't with him every day, I mean, but me, Rick, and David weren't either, but at least we was there when he came home from making movies and stuff like that. She didn't have that privilege. And I hear all this stuff that the fans are talking about on Facebook and what she's saying and everything. And this Michael Edwards guy, I mean, that's my niece. You know, I would destroy this guy if I ever saw him face to face.
Mm.
I mean, that's my niece. That's not only my niece, that's Elvis's daughter. Oh no, you don't do that. Uh-uh. I'll rip your head off for that. I mean, I was talking with David and I said, David, I said, you was Elvis's bodyguard. He said, yeah. And he said, and I would do this for free. He said, Michael,
No payment required.
Michael Edwards would not be around if I ever get around him. I promise. I said, same here, David. I said, I would destroy this man. I said, I mean, that was Elvis's whole world was in that little girl right there. And I mean, it breaks my heart. I mean, that's why you can hear me. My voice gets a little cracky here because I get emotional thinking about the life that she led. And I'm going, how much better it would have been if Elvis would have been alive. I
Mhm.
mean, he raised me, Rick, and David, and we turned out pretty good, I think. Yeah, there's a lot of things the fans probably disagree with, but he pretty much raised us. And I mean, she would have known the Lord, and that's one thing for sure. And all I know is Priscilla just dumps her off at some Scientology, and oh, you're going to take care of her, you're going to raise her. No, what kind of parental guidance is that right there? I mean, are you kidding me? I just, I can't read that because first off, I have have a serious problem with blood pressure. I mean, I'm sure my blood pressure would go through the roof. I'd probably end up in the hospital if I did.
Hmm.
But just knowing that the heartbreak that she had to endure and stuff like that, and there was nothing that Uncle Billy could do to help,
Yeah.
I would have done anything for that little girl. All she had to do was call. And I'd have been there in a heartbeat. I mean, I had to hitchhike to get there, but I'd have got there somehow to get her and protect her.
Well, I haven't read much of the book, but my wife Melanie she listened to the audiobook and she said it's one of the best audiobooks she's ever listened to. So
Good.
she said it was just incredibly moving. And so, and I again, I haven't read very much of it, but all indications seem to be that it's a really, really moving story. So
I bet it is. I
yeah.
mean, it's like I said on Facebook, probably all the fears that I had when Elvis passed away, and when I saw her just riding around in a golf cart by herself. And I mean, I guess that's my third regret is when, because she came riding up to me when I got to Graceland when Elvis passed away. And Rick and David were standing in the backyard, and I walked up to him, and I could see her in the distance riding her golf cart. I said, "Does she know?" And they said, "Yeah." She saw when they was taking her dad out, taking Elvis out. Oh my God. And she pulls up on her golf cart. "You want to go for a ride, Uncle Billy?" "No, not right now, sweetie." I said, I will in a little bit later. I said, right now I want to talk to Uncle Rick and Uncle David." "Okay, I'll be back." And I wish I'd have gone with her. But, when Priscilla took her away from Memphis, she took her away from everybody that really loved her.
Hmm.
You know, she had family here, she had me, Rick, and David, and she had, Billy and Joe Smith and Danny and I mean Billy and Joe's kids, and you know, Elvis's family was here. And so when when Priscilla took her, that was it.
Hmm.
All the ties that was with Elvis were gone. There was nobody there to talk, share the good and funny stories and tell her how great her dad really was. But she wasn't allowed to talk to anybody like that. So that's why I can't read it. I mean,
Totally
I'm,
makes sense.
I'm emotional just even thinking about it. I mean, but if I read it and heard her own words, it would crush me.
I want to wrap up with this
I could
final question that
help her. I mean, so yeah, go ahead.
maybe that ties in really well with this final question. This is from Joan, which I think is a perfect wrap up to this conversation. She says, "Do you think Elvis had any idea how much the entire world loved him?"
I'm sure in the back of his mind, it may have crossed it, but no, not the way it is today. I mean, when I see the fans at Graceland and during Elvis week and on his birthday, the celebrations, and I see the celebrations people are having on Facebook, and now he would just be amazed by it. But I'd like to close by just saying this, that you know he probably knew how much you loved him, but what you don't know is how much he loved you. And that's one of the things that we tried to get across in the book, The Faith of Elvis, is how much he loved those fans. That was his whole reason for living. I mean, people they say hindsight's 2020, and everybody goes, maybe he worked himself a little bit too hard there, which he did, but he could not stand the thought of turning away. I mean, he could not turn his fans away. Even if he was on his deathbed, he would still get up and perform. And that's pretty much what he did. So, uh, but he could not turn those fans away. That's how much he loved them. So, and God bless his fans. I mean, I hear all this stuff. So and so saved Graceland and did this and did that. No, nobody saved Graceland. The fans did.
Hmm.
The people listening to this right here, the Elvis fans is what saved Elvis. I mean, saved Graceland and everything else. He's as big today as he was when he was still alive because of you, your love, and thank God for you. That's all I can say. God bless you all.
What a beautiful message. Wow. And a great way to wrap up this conversation. Well, Billy, it has been a privilege talking with you, as it always is.
Yeah.
And it was also a privilege collaborating on this book. I hope that if people are listening to this, but they haven't read the book, they will go grab a copy at their local bookstore or a Barnes and Noble or Amazon or wherever. And yeah, thanks
I
for
haven't
taking
kept
time to
up with
chat.
where it sells at anymore now. I
They
just
can
got,
they can get it anywhere. You know, it's interesting when I read the reviews on, and I know you can leave reviews on all kinds of sites, but whenever I look at the Amazon reviews in particular, the love people have for your stories in this book, it's overwhelming, you know, and people have told me, just like they've told you so many times, that they just really, really love this book. I had somebody tell me that just the other day who I didn't realize had even read the book. They said, I just really enjoyed that book. So thanks for making your stories available. And thanks for allowing me to be a small part of that process. I consider it a huge honor. I really do.
yeah, I'm glad that, it took me several attempts to get finally get the right writer for this thing. But when you came up, it was when we first talked, I said, okay, this is it right here. This guy right here. He's got it. He gets the whole picture right here. So
Well, I'm
it
I'm
was a
glad you
pleasure.
felt that
It
way.
wasn't even like working for me. I mean, I'm sitting here, okay, but it was just like I'm talking to a friend, and that's how it comes across, in the book. And that's the way it should be. When you're working with a writer, if that person is, if you're working with a writer and that person is not your friend, it's going to come across that way in the book too. So that people could see between the lines in our book what we did. So
Well, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I almost said no to this project because I had several other projects going on at the same time. And I told my wife, I said, "Man, this would be a really fun book to work on. It's kind of like a dream come true, but I literally don't know how I'm going to fit it in." And she said, "If you don't do this book, you're an idiot." And she may
I'm
have
glad you
used
decided
stronger words than
it.
that. I don't remember, but she was right, and I just thought, I've got to do this. How can I pass up on an opportunity to talk
Yeah,
to Billy and to write about Elvis? And I'm so glad that I did. It was an absolute blast.
me too. All right,
This
bud.
was fun. So thank
Yeah,
you
it
again.
was. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this thing when you get it done. So
Sounds
yeah,
wonderful. Thank you again.
give me a link and we'll share it.
Okay, sounds wonderful.
Okay, thanks.